Hey there, this is Perch. Marvel's been running since Stan Lee's passing. The Stan soapbox, kind of full page, and it's funny because of a comic that is fairly high priced, you start to think it doesn't work this way, but you start to think in your head that every page is really valuable. So when you get a full page devoted to something, and if that full page like has one panel kind of blown up, with super big font size and text, it's like it's weird because in the back of my head I'm always thinking, wow, this is an expensive page. This is some prime real estate here, and it doesn't exactly work that way. But um, they've been running these Stan soapbox pages since Stanley's death, and it's really just kind of a flavor of something from Stan's soapbox from which was an old editorial. So usually a fairly short, one paragraph, maybe two paragraphs of Stan kind of talking about something. And Stan used to write these things for, gosh, I mean, a decade more. I don't know. I should have done some research here. I don't know how many little editorial comments, but if you take Stanley's entire life and you take the interviews he's done and you take the things he said, I mean, you've got books and books and books and books of content that Stanley produced, for lack of a better word, of things that Stanley did. Um, and that there's nothing, it's to see them reprinted is kind of cool. It's a nice nod to Stan Lee saying, hey, here's something from the business from the 60s or the 70s. Here's kind of this person who's seen as the father of Marvel Comics. A topic for another time, as some people brought up, is Stan's relationship to Jack Kirby and some of the other kind of famous artists, Roy, and writers and others. Um, Steve Ditko, some of these people who had a very mixed relationship with Stan. Mixed, maybe being a kind word in some cases, where there was the feeling like Stan Lee took more credit than he was owed to some of these classic characters, and a bit of I would say a controversial character. Of late, recently, some people took opportunity of his death to kind of drag up a bunch of this stuff of like, hey, remember he was anti-artist, anti-creator, and a really rotten person, which is really sickening. I understand, and there are certainly limits, to it. But I think when someone dies, I think it's time to remember the good parts, let the bad parts rest if you can. I'm not saying like, hey, Hitler dies, so we should just go, hey, let's remember all the good parts of him. I'm not saying that at all. Hitler was a monster, and his legacy is rooted in evil deeds. But for people who had a lot of good accomplishments, maybe a lot of shady accomplishments, I mean, just kind of different parts of their life. And if those shady accomplishments have been dealt with, or they've been, they've come out, they've been exposed, it's been part of the conversation, then I think it's time to just it's why grind the axe with somebody who's passed on. I think that's just distasteful and wrong. And I think Stanley definitely fits into that. Were there some shady things that happened with Kirby? Yeah, absolutely. Kirby did get shafted in some areas, and so did some other creators. And Stanley's a businessman, knew what he was doing, and when he took some credit he shouldn't have. And but he also contributed a lot of really amazing things, and he and he's passed away now, and Jack Kirby is well known, and those rights, those wrongs were not completely righted, but they I don't know, it's a sticky topic, and it's a video for another time. I've said another time, I veered into it, so I'll come back to it. But back on the topic of Stan's soapbox and these editorials being printed, I think it's a nice thing to do. However, from the very beginning, from the very first one, it kind of, sort of, not so kind of, sort of, but really actually felt like the whole purpose of putting these editorials in the comics was to kind of argue against complaints and criticisms against the comics. And why it felt that way is there'd be a topic that would push out either on social media or at a convention or at a retailer summit, or back at the Diamond Summit, you had kind of an open letter read about some of the big problems in the industry, many of which Marvel are contributing to. And then 30, 45 days later, some old Stan soapbox thing pops up in the comics, and there it is, and it's refuting or rebutting some of the criticisms. The problem is it's rebutting it from the distant past. It's rebutting it from an editorial Stan wrote in the mid 60s. And I pointed this out to an editor who was very condescending, very quick to say, well, that just goes to show that these complaints are not new and have been dealt with them for decades, and the business is fine. So maybe you should just shut up. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. That would be like, if you were complaining about workers' rights today, and somebody posted up a rebuttal from the 1800s where you had child workers in mines saying, see, you've always been complaining about workers' rights and things are okay, shut up. It's like, no, those are very different. Same topic, very different times, very different eras, very different circumstances. It's not apples to apples at all, and that. And I think it's extra cowardly and pathetic when the person that they're using to make this argument is Stan Lee, who is passed on, who in a number of different interviews professed his deep love and affection of listening to the fans and hearing what they have to say, and meeting him at conventions. He was certainly a businessman. Some will claim that was a bit of his act, but regardless, Stan Lee was an ambassador for comics. And so to now say, we're going to get those trolls on Twitter by reprinting something Stan said about bigotry in the 60s, it's like, that's not, it's a completely false argument. And again, it's a cowardly one. I don't agree with many of the things that people criticize the comic industry for. As we talked about on this channel, our comments that comics are imploding and the entire business is going to go away, and Indiegogo and crowdfunding is the only future that will survive. I mean, that's ludicrous. I think that's silly on every level. But I don't think that the answer to that is to use a passed away icon to publish a bit of his text from the 60s as a way of saying, see, Stan Lee agrees with us. I mean, good Lord, what should some of the people who are making their criticisms start posting up things from Abraham Lincoln or George Washington or Jesus? I mean, whatever. And you don't even have to be religious. Just my point is, you want to. I mean, this makes no sense. This is a nonsensical, dumb way to make your point, and you should have the courage to stand by your own convictions. If you believe what you're doing is right, if you believe that you are making good decisions, and I hope you do. If you're running a business, you should be doing what you think is right. So by the same token, then you should answer to it yourself. I mean, if Joe Q, Dan Dididio, good Lord, whoever it might be, Jim Lee, Al Ewing, I mean, from a writer to an editor to whoever you might be, if you're making a decision, if you think that you are standing up to bigotry or sexism or whatever else, then you don't need Stan Lee to come in and save you. If you're right, just state your opinion. I think Joe Q it shouldn't be Stan's soapbox, it should be Joe's. Put Joe, have Joe write a little editorial that goes in the comics to say, we're doing this. The one that came out here in May is responding to the criticism that came up at the Retailer Summit that Marvel publishes too many titles. So you have this editorial from Stan the 60s saying, some of our people are saying you're printing too many titles and it's making us go broke, so you should have fewer comics. And Stan says, but other fans say that they love the comics and they want to get more, so we're trying to meet that demand and publish lots of comics, and we'd love a vacation, but we're trying to listen to you, the fans, and do what you're asking for. And that's kind of the response or the retort to this comment. And so number one, Yeah, I mean, Stan even says in his editorial, we've got lots of 25-cent mags. Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, even with inflation, um, clocking in at 4.99, that's a pretty big difference to 25 cents in the 60s. I think 25 cents in the 60s is the equivalent of like $1.60 today. So, not quite the same. And also, Stan points out a lot of fans are asking for more. Okay, there's not a lot of fans asking for more right now. I mean, if there's one loud petition, one loud voice that I do not hear, it's, man, I wish Marvel would publish even more comics. I mean, no, literally nobody is asking for this. The retailers aren't asking for it. The fans aren't asking for it. There are fans who are saying we want more comics like Miss Marvel. There are fans who say I like what Marvel's doing with some of their direction, but nobody is saying give us more. They're saying cut some of these other books if you need to, but everybody's arguing about what type of book should be published. Nobody is arguing that there's not enough of them. I mean, literally nobody. I prove me wrong, internet. Where is anyone saying, man, we just don't have enough comics on the shelf? Um, it's the most awkward thing, and I think Joe should write his own column and say, you know what, we're doing this, we think it's right, or do it a different way. Cop to it, say, you know what, we make a lot of money when we publish all these comics, and we think that if we publish less comics, we would make less money. So we're publishing lots of comics. I mean, that's our strategy. Okay, that's good. Do that. But I thought month after month the Stanley Soapbox thing gets printed, and it's always not always, but most of the time it's the weirdest, most not obscure but kind of oddest little comment from him. It's not the obvious ones. It's not talking about reaching from within and finding that inner hero and doing what's right, or taking a stand, or it's none of that stuff. It's not hey, we're the world is kind of bad out there at times, and we're creating an imaginary world that we think is pretty important, and thank you for being on that journey. It's never that. It's always the we don't tolerate bigotry, which of course nobody should tolerate bigotry, but it's just weird to have these memories of Stan used to portray current arguments. I think it's low class, and I think it's not the true memory of Stan. It's just like these carefully plucked little sections that's trying to kind of retroactively kind of portray how the company has been and grown, and apply it to current circumstances, which are very different from the circumstances of the 60s. And keep in mind, this is my stance regardless of if I agree or not. If the for the people, and it's unclear how many people are actually asking for this, or if people are actually asking for this, but for the people who will say, I don't want women in comics. I think that's women. This is man's work to do the comics. I think that's the stupid, just stupid comment on the surface. There have been amazing, talented female creators, writers, artists across the board for a long time. I mean, some of my absolute favorite comics in the 80s had female creators. There are some amazing female creators doing comics now. Raina Telgemeier is a amazing creator. Obviously, her work is not, it's aimed at a completely different audience for me, but you pick it up, and the skill and the quality of the books and the pages, and the how she's laying out her stuff and the business she runs, man, there is a legend, really, right there, who's doing great business. So I find that whole argument is stupid on the surface. But even though I find it stupid, I don't want to see a Stan Lee, paragraph editorial from the '60s talking about I love those groovy swinging women and their groovy stories. I don't want that published as a response to this idiot argument. It's just it's class. It's low class. I keep saying that word. It's just it is low class use of a passed away icon. And I don't know. I feel very strongly about it. I posted a few times on the topic. I feel very strongly on that, because every time I see it, it just leaves a really gross taste in my mouth. It's I think it's cheap, and I think it's absolutely the work of a very, very poor, uh, very, uh, I just somebody who's trying to. It feels like somebody's trying to kind of burn the business down. Somebody who's reaching back into the past, pulling things to the front that doesn't belong there. That doesn't fit the argument. Only serves to cheapen all sides of it. And in many cases, it's not an argument that needs to be had. Somebody saying, let's get rid of all the women in comics is not a serious, sane, intelligent person. I think you can, best answer, ignore. If it gets loud and by ignoring it, it gains some power, then I think simple statements are easy. Like, shut up, you're an idiot. Just the end. You don't need to write a paragraph about why that's an idiotic statement. It's an idiotic statement. It's like, it would be like if you said you can breathe underwater. Why would you debate somebody who's saying something like that? You can't. It's just facts. Facts are your friend. And I think diving into a big, long debate around facts is just, it's a waste of everybody's time. It's, I guess it's how people used to pass the day. But anyway, what do you think? Are you a fan of these things? Maybe you are. And if so, why? I promise I'm not going to beat up on you. I'm just curious. Maybe there's a side I'm not looking at. Let me know in the comments. Maybe they bug you like they bug me. Let me know. Hey, please subscribe, follow, like, notify, all those things. Help this channel grow. Follow me on social media, Comic Purge, contribute to my Patreon because I'm an alcoholic. And thank you for listening.